This story delves into themes of psychological mystery and existential dread. Listener discretion is advised. The first sign was the gas station. Not the kind you see now, all sleek digital screens and touch-pay options, but a relic. The kind with manual pumps, the numbers clicking over like an old odometer, and a faded sign advertising leaded fuel for 99 cents a gallon. My name is Michael, and I was just trying to get home, taking a shortcut through what my GPS assured me was unnamed rural Road 7. It was late summer, the sun already dipping below the horizon, casting long eerie shadows across the endless cornfields of central Pennsylvania. I'd missed my turn off I-80 by a good hour, and my phone signal had vanished somewhere near a forgotten county line, leaving me with a rapidly draining battery and a map app that had decided to commit digital suicide. So when I saw the flickering neon sign for Havenwood Falls Gas and Grub in the distance, it felt like a miracle. A low-slung cinder block building with a single buzzing fluorescent light above the door. As I pulled up, my headlights cut through the gloom, illuminating a pristine cherry-red Ford F-150 parked by the pumps, the kind they stopped making in the late 90s, maybe early 2000s at the latest. I thought retro enthusiast and didn't think much more of it. But then I saw the prices on the pump itself. Not just 99 cents for leaded, which granted I knew wasn't a thing anymore, but regular unleaded for $1.29, diesel for $1.15. My mind did a quick mental calculation. Inflation, gas crises, the relentless march of time. These prices were insane. They were from another era entirely. I got out of my car, the gravel crunching under my sneakers, and walked towards the small convenience store. The air was still, thick with the scent of cut grass and something else, something vaguely metallic like old machinery. The store itself was a time capsule. The windows were plastered with faded posters for movies I hadn't thought about in decades. Armageddon, The Big Lebowski, There's Something About Mary. A cardboard cutout of the Spice Girls stood guard near the entrance, looking impossibly vibrant and out of place. Inside, the bell above the door jingled, a sound that felt more like a chime from a forgotten past. The store was dim, lit by more of those buzzing fluorescents. The shelves were stocked with brands I recognized, but in packaging that was distinctly older. Cereal boxes with designs I hadn't seen since I was a kid. Candy bars that had long since been discontinued. A rack of S tapes, remember those? Blockbuster Video hadn't existed in my world for well over a decade. Behind the counter, a man with a thick mustache and a baseball cap, probably in his late 50s, was wiping down the counter with a rag. He looked up, a friendly, almost too friendly smile spreading across his face. "Well, howdy there," he said, his voice a slow, pleasant drawl. "Lost your way, I reckon?" "Yeah, something like that," I replied, trying to sound nonchalant, but my eyes were darting around the store, trying to process the sheer anachronism of it all. My GPS went out, just trying to find my way back to the highway. "Ah, technology," he chuckled, shaking his head. "Always letting you down when you need it most. Happens to the best of us." He gestured vaguely towards a rotary phone on the counter. "Landline's your best bet round here. Cell service is spotty at best once you're off the main roads." I pulled out my smartphone, a sleek, modern device, and held it up. "Yeah, mine's completely dead. No signal, no GPS, battery's almost gone." He squinted at it, a flicker of genuine curiosity in his eyes. "Well now, isn't that a fancy little gadget? Looks like one of those new Nokia models, but different." He reached for a stack of newspapers on the counter. "Here, take a look at the map in the back of the Gazette. Might help you out. We got a few copies left from yesterday." He handed me a newspaper, the Havenwood Falls Gazette. I glanced at the headline, something about the local high school football team, and then my eyes dropped to the date. August 17th, 1998. My heart skipped a beat. A cold dread began to creep up my spine. My mind screamed prank. Some kind of elaborate, bizarre retro-themed town, maybe for a movie shoot or a tourist trap trying to recreate the past. But the man's expression was too earnest, too normal. The dust on the vase tapes, the subtle wear and tear on the candy wrappers. It all felt too real. Sir," I managed, my voice a little hoarse. "What year do you think it is?" He looked at me, a slight frown creasing his brow. "Why, it's 1998, of course. August. You feeling all right, son? You look a little pale." I mumbled something about needing a soda, grabbed a can of Surge, a drink that hadn't been widely available in decades, and paid with a crisp $20 bill. He gave me change in coins that looked perfectly normal, but the total was so low it felt like I was robbing him. I hurried back to my car, my mind racing. This couldn't be real. It was impossible. I fumbled with my phone again, trying to get any kind of signal, any proof that the outside world still existed. Nothing. Dead. My car radio, which had been playing a modern pop station when I lost signal, now crackled with static. I tried tuning it, and after a few frustrating minutes, I picked up a faint signal. It was a local station playing a song by the Goo Goo Dolls. Iris. A song from 1998. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a movie set. The feeling in the air, the genuine normalcy of the gas station attendant, the sheer detail of it all. It was too complete, too seamless. I started my car, the engine roaring to life, and drove further into Havenwood Falls. The road wound past small, well-kept houses, each with a neat lawn and a porch swing. Cars from the late 90s and early 2000s were parked in driveways. Minivans, sedans, SUVs, all looking perfectly maintained, not like museum pieces but everyday vehicles. Kids rode bikes down the street, their clothes, their hairstyles, their clunky sneakers, all straight out of a forgotten photo album. No smartphones in sight, no earbuds, no hoverboards. Just kids playing street hockey and riding bikes. A local diner glowed invitingly on the corner, its sign reading Betty's Diner ST 1955. Through the window I could see people eating, laughing, their faces illuminated by the warm, yellow light. On the sidewalk a couple walked hand in hand, the woman wearing a floral sundress and chunky platform sandals, the man in a plaid shirt and baggy jeans. Their conversation, a snippet I caught as I drove past, was about the upcoming premiere of Rush Hour. A profound, chilling realization began to settle over me. It wasn't just that the town looked like 1998. It was 1998. For these people, for this entire place, time hadn't moved forward. Panic started to set in. My breath hitched in my throat. This was beyond anything I could comprehend. I needed to leave. I needed to get out. I drove to the edge of town, following what looked like the main road, hoping it would lead me back to the highway, back to the world I knew. The road became less paved, then gravel, then just 2 dirt tracks through overgrown fields. The cornfields, which had seemed endless before, now felt like a suffocating wall. I kept driving, pushing faster, my heart pounding against my ribs. The sun had fully set now, and the darkness was absolute, save for my headlights cutting through the inky blackness. After what felt like an eternity, the road curved sharply, and I saw something in the distance. A sign. Relief flooded through me, momentarily pushing back the terror. I sped up, eager to see a familiar highway number, a town name from my own time. But as I got closer, my headlights illuminated the sign, stark and clear in the darkness. It was a weather-beaten wooden sign, the paint peeling, the words carved deeply. "Welcome to Havenwood Falls." My tires crunched on the gravel, and I slammed on the brakes, skidding to a halt. My car was facing the opposite direction. I had just driven a complete loop. I was back at the entrance of the town. The cornfield stretched out on all sides, silent and ominous. The air was still heavy. I looked in my rearview mirror, and through the darkness, I could just make out the faint glow of the town behind me. Havenwood Falls. Stuck. Forever. And now so was I. The feeling of being utterly trapped settled over me. Colder than the night air. My tires, still spinning fruitlessly in the dirt, were a testament to my futile escape. Havenwood Falls. Stuck. Forever. And now so was I. I killed the engine, the sudden silence deafening. The moon, a sliver of bone in the ink-black sky, offered little comfort. My phone, a useless brick outside the town limits, now showed a single full bar. Cruel trick. I tried calling 911 again. Nothing. Just a flat dead line. No dial tone, no operator, just silence. It was as if the phone knew, even if I didn't want to admit it, that there was no outside world to reach. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prick at me. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. This wasn't a nightmare. This was real. And I was alone. With no other option, I turned the car around, the tires crunching on the gravel road that led back into Havenwood Falls. The faint glow I'd seen earlier grew brighter, a deceptive beacon in the darkness. As I drove, the first hint of dawn began to paint the eastern sky in bruised purples and grays. The town slowly revealed itself under the emerging light. It wasn't just the cars or the storefronts. It was the quality of the light itself, somehow softer, less harsh than what I was used to. The air smelled different too, a blend of wood smoke, damp earth, and something vaguely metallic like an old coin. I parked my car on Main Street, near a diner with a faded yellow sign that read Betty's Bites. A classic American diner, the kind you see in movies set decades ago. But this wasn't a movie set. This was real. And it was 1998. People were starting to emerge. A paperboy on a bicycle, his bag overflowing with newspapers, tossed one onto the porch of a small white house. I squinted. The date on the newspaper banner clearly read, Saturday, October 24th, 1998. My stomach plummeted. It was October 24th, 2023, when I first drove into this town. Now it was the same date 25 years in the past. A woman in a floral dress and a perfectly coiffed bob walked past, carrying a wicker basket. Her hairspray scent hung heavy in the crisp morning air. A group of teenagers, all wearing baggy jeans, skate shoes, and band t-shirts Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Green Day, laughed loudly as they headed towards the local high school. They were oblivious. All of them. I needed to find someone. Someone who knew. Someone who could explain. Betty's Bites seemed like the most logical place to start. It was already bustling, the clatter of plates and muffled conversations drifting out onto the street. I pushed open the heavy glass door, the small bell above it jingling a cheerful, anachronistic tune. The interior was a time capsule. Red vinyl booths, a long counter with spinning stools, checkerboard floor, and a jukebox in the corner playing a faint, tinny pop song I almost recognized from my childhood. The aroma of coffee and bacon hit me, strangely comforting despite the surreal circumstances. A waitress, probably in her late 40s with a name tag that read Brenda, approached me. She had a kind, tired face and wore a crisp white uniform with a small apron. "Morning, hon, just one?" she asked, her voice warm, carrying a gentle southern lilt. Yeah, just me," I managed, trying to sound normal, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. I slid into an empty booth by the window, the vinyl a little sticky. "Coffee?" she asked, already pouring a steaming cup from a glass pot. "Please." I took a sip. It was strong, good. Real. "Anything else for ya, darlin'?" she asked, pen poised over her notepad. "Actually, I'm a little lost." I began, trying to choose my words carefully. "I think I took a wrong turn last night. My phone's dead, and my GPS isn't working." Brenda chuckled, a soft, weary sound. "Oh honey, GPS? What's that, some newfangled thing? We barely get cell service out here, let alone." "Whatever that is. You're in Havenwood Falls. Where were you trying to get to?" "I was heading to, Lakeview," I lied quickly, naming the next town on my original route. I seemed to be a bit disoriented. "Lakeview? That's a good hour's drive further north," she said, shaking her head. "You must have really taken a detour." "Well, don't you worry. Just finish your breakfast, and I'm sure someone can point you in the right direction. Old Man Hemlock at the gas station always knows the best routes." Old Man Hemlock? The same gas station that had been closed in Part 1. My blood ran cold. "Right," I said, forcing a smile. "Maybe I'll just have some pancakes then." As Brenda walked away, I pulled out my phone again. It showed the current date, October 24th, 2023. But the newspaper on the counter next to me was dated October 24th, 1998. My heart pounded. This wasn't just a town that looked like 1998. It was 1998 for everyone else. But I was still in 2023. I was a ghost. Or they were. I ate my pancakes, forcing each bite down, my mind racing. How could this be? A glitch in time? A pocket dimension? I felt like I was losing my mind. After breakfast, I paid Brenda with a crisp $100 bill from my wallet. Her eyes widened slightly. "Well, aren't you a high roller? Don't usually see these around here." She gave me my change, a stack of older-looking bills. The currency was the same, but the designs felt dated. I walked out of Betty's Bites and headed towards the gas station Brenda mentioned. It was indeed open, a small dusty place with two ancient pumps. An old man with a greasy cap and a perpetually squinting gaze was wiping down a shelf of motor oil inside. "Excuse me," I said, stepping inside. The air was thick with the smell of gasoline and stale coffee. "I was wondering if you could help me. I seem to have lost my way. My car's fine, but I can't seem to get any signals for navigation." The old man, who I assumed was Old Man Hemlock, looked at me, his eyes sharp and surprisingly lucid. "Navigation, eh? You mean like a map?" he grunted, gesturing to a rack of folded paper maps that looked like they hadn't been updated since the Eisenhower administration. No, like a phone, I explained, holding up my smartphone. It's a modern device. It usually has a GPS built in. He peered at my phone with suspicion, then snorted. Fancy little thing. Don't know what all that fuss is about. We got paper maps, son. And a good compass. That's all you need to find your way. He paused, his gaze lingering on my clothes, then my car parked outside. You're not from around here, are you? No, I admitted. First time in Havenwood Falls. He nodded slowly, a strange, knowing look in his eyes. Thought so. Don't see many folks like you pass through anymore. Not since. He trailed off, his gaze drifting towards the window, out at the quiet street. Not since what? I pressed, a knot tightening in my chest. He shook his head. Nothing. Just, things change. Or they don't. Hard to say which is worse. He turned back to his shelves. Now, where were you headed again? I repeated my lie. Lakeview. He pulled out a large, worn map, unfolding it with practiced ease. Alright, so you're here, see? Havenwood Falls. You follow this highway Route 7 straight north. You'll hit Lakeview in about an hour. Maybe a bit more if you hit traffic in Willow Creek. Willow Creek. Another town that didn't exist in my present. Thank you, I said, taking the map he offered. It felt heavy, substantial, a relic. As I turned to leave, Old Man Hemlock's voice stopped me. Just a word of advice, son. Don't try to go off the path. Stick to Route 7. It's the only way out. Or in, depending on how you look at it. His eyes held a flicker of something unsettling, fear? Warning. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. I will. I walked out, clutching the map, my mind reeling. Don't try to go off the path. He knew. Or at least he knew something. I got back into my car, the map spread out on the passenger seat. Route 7. I knew I had been on Route 7 when I tried to leave last night. It had simply ended. Vanished. A new thought struck me. What if the town wasn't just stuck in time, but also geographically isolated? What if the road itself was part of the loop? I decided to test it. I would drive south on Route 7, in the opposite direction from Lakeview. Maybe the barrier was only in one direction. It was a desperate hope, but it was all I had. I started the engine and drove through the quaint, seemingly normal streets of Havenwood Falls. Kids were playing in their yards, sprinklers misting green lawns, and the scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the wood smoke. It was an idyllic scene, a picture-perfect slice of Americana, circa 1998. But beneath the surface, a chilling truth hummed. I passed the town limits sign again. Welcome to Havenwood Falls. EST 1888. No mention of 1998. No mention of anything out of the ordinary. The road stretched ahead, winding through fields of corn, just like the night before. Except now it was daytime. The fields were vast, green, swaying gently in a non-existent breeze. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. I kept driving faster and faster, watching my odometer. 1 mile. 2 miles. 5. 10. The road was still there. No sudden end. No invisible wall. Hope surged, a desperate, foolish thing. I drove for what felt like 20 minutes, the scenery unchanging. Cornfields, a few scattered farmhouses, an old red barn. Then a peculiar feeling began to creep over me. A sense of déjà vu, but stronger, more oppressive. I passed a mailbox with the name Anderson on it. I distinctly remembered seeing that mailbox on my way into town. I dismissed it as coincidence. A few minutes later, I saw a familiar stretch of road. A dip, a curve, and then the abandoned gas station. The one I'd seen when I first arrived, before I even reached Havenwood Falls. It was boarded up, overgrown, exactly as it had been. My foot instinctively hit the brake. I looked at my odometer. It read exactly 10 miles. I had driven 10 miles south. But I was back at the entrance point, the initial marker of my arrival. The very spot where I'd first felt that strange shift. I got out of the car, my legs trembling. I walked to the edge of the road, staring at the overgrown gas station. It was undeniably the same. And then I looked back the way I had come. The road stretched out, leading into Havenwood Falls. I had been driving for what felt like hours, convinced I was escaping. But the road, the very road I thought was leading me out, was now undeniably leading me back in. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of disbelief. I stared at the overgrown gas station, the same faded sign, the same abandoned pumps. It was impossible. It defied logic, geography, and everything I understood about the world. A cold dread seeped into my bones, deeper than any fear I'd felt before. I wasn't just lost, I was caught, trapped. I scrambled back into my car, fumbling for the keys, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped them. This couldn't be real. It had to be a trick of the light, a bizarre coincidence, a severe case of fatigue playing tricks on my mind. I needed to prove it. I needed to get out. I jammed the car into reverse, tires spitting gravel as I spun around. My foot pressed hard on the accelerator, sending the sedan hurtling back down the road, away from the gas station, away from Havenwood Falls. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The trees blurred past, a green tunnel of desperation. I watched the odometer counting the miles, willing the landscape to change, to show me something, anything that wasn't more of the same. Minutes stretched into an eternity. 10 minutes. 15. The road twisted and turned, familiar in a way that made my stomach clench. I recognized a particularly gnarled oak tree, a cluster of dilapidated mailboxes. No, it couldn't be. My mind screamed at me to deny it, to look away. But then through a break in the trees I saw it. The silhouette of a building, unmistakably the gas station, looming larger with every passing second. My foot instinctively slammed on the brake, bringing the car to a screeching halt. Dust swirled around me. I stared, my breath catching in my throat. It was the same station. The exact same one. The faded Texaco sign, the broken window, the vines creeping up the pumps. I had driven for miles and somehow I had ended up right back where I started. The road that was supposed to lead out of Havenwood Falls simply circled back into itself. A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a trick of the mind. Havenwood Falls wasn't just stuck in 1998. It was a cage. I was trapped. My phone, which had been buzzing intermittently with notifications from the outside world earlier, now held a dead battery, despite being fully charged when I left my apartment. I tried the car radio, but it only crackled with static. The GPS on my dashboard displayed a blank screen, a mocking void where a map should have been. It was as if the town itself had severed all ties with the present, and with it, my ability to connect to anything beyond its borders. There was no escaping. Not this way, at least. My only option was to go back into the town, to understand, to find a different way out. With a profound sense of dread, I turned the car around once more, heading back towards the heart of Havenwood Falls. The quaint charm I had initially felt was now replaced by a chilling sense of unease. Every perfectly preserved storefront, every vintage car, every smiling face I passed seemed to mock my predicament. The town was a meticulously crafted diorama, and I was now a reluctant, unwitting exhibit. I drove slowly, trying to absorb every detail, searching for any anomaly, any crack in the facade. The old diner, Pop's Diner, still had its neon sign flickering, casting a warm, inviting glow that felt utterly out of place with my growing terror. A group of teenagers dressed in baggy jeans and oversized hoodies skateboarded past, their laughter echoing eerily in the late afternoon. They looked so carefree, so oblivious to the invisible wall that surrounded their world. My stomach growled, a mundane reminder of my very real, very present needs. I hadn't eaten since morning, and the thought of facing this impossible situation on an empty stomach felt unbearable. Pop's Diner seemed like the most logical place to start. It was public and hopefully I could gather some information or at least a hot meal. I parked my car, a sleek modern SUV, among a row of older models, a Ford Explorer, a Honda Civic, a Chevrolet Cavalier, all circa 1998. My vehicle stuck out like a sore thumb, a beacon from another time. I hesitated, then decided against trying to hide it. What was the point? Everyone here was already living in an alternate reality. My car was just another oddity in a town full of them. Pushing open the heavy glass door of Pop's Diner, a wave of nostalgia, mingled with acute anxiety, washed over me. The aroma of sizzling bacon and stale coffee hung in the air. The interior was a perfect snapshot of a bygone era. Red vinyl booths, a long chrome counter with spinning stools, a jukebox in the corner playing a vaguely familiar pop song that I couldn't quite place, but knew for certain was from the late 90s. A few patrons were scattered around, mostly older couples and a couple of lone men hunched over cups of coffee, reading newspapers. Their clothes, their hairstyles, their entire demeanor screamed 1998. No smartphones, no earbuds, just genuine human interaction or quiet contemplation. It was almost beautiful if it wasn't so terrifying. I slid into an empty booth by the window, trying to appear nonchalant, my eyes scanning every detail. On the table, a laminated menu listed prices that made my jaw drop. A cheeseburger for $3.50, a coffee for $1. I almost laughed, a hysterical bubble of air that I quickly suppressed. A waitress approached my table, a wide, genuine smile on her face. She was probably in her early 20s, with bright, curious eyes and a cascade of dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore a crisp white shirt, a navy blue apron, and a name tag that read Emily. "Welcome to Pops," she chirped, her voice bright and friendly. "What can I get for you, honey?" Her cheerfulness was jarring, a stark contrast to the rapidly deteriorating state of my sanity. "Just a coffee to start," I managed, my voice a little hoarse, "and a moment to look at the menu." "No problem at all," Emily said, her smile not faltering. "Take your time. We've got the best pie in Havenwood Falls, by the way. My grandma's recipe." She placed a heavy ceramic mug and a small carafe of coffee in front of me, along with a stack of napkins. As she walked away, I noticed the newspaper left on the counter by a departing customer. My eyes immediately darted to the date. Friday, October 23, 1998. My heart sank even further. It was undeniable. This wasn't just a town decorated like 1998. It was 1998 for everyone living here. But how? And why? I took a sip of the coffee. It was strong, hot, and surprisingly good. I needed to talk to someone, anyone who might offer a clue. Emily seemed approachable. When she returned to take my order, I tried to phrase my questions carefully, subtly. "This is a really charming town, Emily." I began, trying for an easy conversational tone. "I'm just passing through, and I've never seen anything quite like it." Emily beamed. "Oh, Havenwood Falls is wonderful. Been here my whole life. Wouldn't trade it for anything. It seems very well preserved," I continued, choosing my words carefully. "Like time has just stood still here." Her brow furrowed slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing her face before her smile returned. "Well, I guess you could say that. We like things the way they are. No need for all that fuss and change, right?" She chuckled, a light, innocent sound. "So what'll it be?" "The meatloaf special is flying out of here today." I ordered a cheeseburger, trying to mask my growing desperation. "Emily," I pressed gently, "have you ever noticed anything unusual about Havenwood Falls? Any strange occurrences, perhaps? Or people who come and go?" She paused, holding her order pad, her head tilted slightly. "Unusual? Like what?" She thought for a moment, tapping her pen against the pad. Not really. Sometimes we get lost tourists looking for the old covered bridge. But other than that, it's pretty quiet. Just the usual small-town stuff. No one ever talks about leaving," I ventured, pushing my luck. "Or the world outside Havenwood Falls?" Emily laughed, a genuine, unburdened laugh. "Why would anyone want to leave? We've got everything we need right here. And the world outside? Well, it's just more of the same, isn't it? Bigger cities, more traffic. No thanks. We're happy right where we are." Her words, so simple and sincere, sent a chill down my spine. They weren't just content, they were complacent, willfully ignorant, or perhaps genuinely unaware. It was unsettling. They weren't just living in 1998, they were living only in 1998, as if the last 2 decades simply hadn't happened. My cheeseburger arrived, perfectly cooked, with a side of crispy fries. I ate it mechanically, my mind racing. If everyone here was like Emily, completely oblivious, then asking direct questions wouldn't get me anywhere. I needed to observe, to listen, to find something they didn't see. As I ate, I tried to appear casual, but my senses were on high alert. I listened to the snippets of conversation around me. 2 men at the counter were discussing the upcoming Y2K bug, casually dismissing it as overblown media hype. A woman in a booth nearby complained about the price of gas, mentioning it was almost $1.50 a gallon. Every detail was meticulously, agonizingly 1998. I finished my meal, paid with a crisp $20 bill from my wallet, which Emily accepted without a second glance at its modern design. Another strange oversight in this perfectly preserved world. As I stood to leave, my eyes caught a framed photograph on the wall by the exit. It was a black and white picture of Pop's Diner from decades ago, perhaps the 1950s. But beside it, there was another photo, a color one, showing a younger Emily, standing behind the counter, looking almost identical to how she looked now, but with the distinct fashion and hairstyle of the late 90s. The date scrawled on the bottom read, July 1998. My blood ran cold. Emily had just told me she'd been here her whole life. Yet, in that photo she looked the same age as she was now. How was that possible if 25 years had passed outside this town? Did no one age here? Was time not just stop but reset? As I pushed open the diner door, the bell above chiming cheerfully, I glanced back at Emily. She was wiping down a table, humming along to the radio. She caught my eye and offered another one of her bright, innocent smiles. But this time it sent a shiver of true terror down my spine. It wasn't just the town that was stuck. The people were too. And I was now one of them, trapped in a perpetual loop of a year-long past. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Havenwood Falls wasn't just a place. It was a prison, and its inmates were blissfully unaware of their confinement. And now so was I. The air seemed to thicken, pressing in on me, stealing the oxygen from my lungs. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Havenwood Falls. Prison. And I, its latest unwitting inmate. The words echoed in my mind, a chilling mantra, each syllable a fresh stab of terror. How could I have been so blind? So utterly, completely oblivious? The quaint charm, the nostalgic glow, the unchanging routines, they weren't comforting. They were shackles meticulously forged and polished to a gleam that masked their true purpose. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. I had to get out. This wasn't a quaint mystery anymore. It was a nightmare unfolding in broad daylight. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my car keys. I had to try again immediately. Maybe my previous attempts were just bad luck? Wrong turns. A series of unfortunate coincidences. My mind, desperate to reject the horrific truth, clung to these flimsy excuses. I practically sprinted to my car. A late-model sedan that felt jarringly out of place among the vintage vehicles lining the streets. Its sleek lines, its digital dashboard, they screamed 21st century, a beacon of reality in this meticulously crafted illusion. Or so I hoped. I slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool beneath my clammy hands. The engine roared to life with a comforting familiarity, a sound that, for a fleeting moment, almost convinced me everything was normal. Almost. I backed out of the driveway, the gravel crunching under the tires, and aimed for the main road leading out of town. The same road I tried to take countless times. The same road that had always inexplicably led me back. This time I wouldn't stop. I would drive until the gas tank was empty, until the wheels fell off, until I saw a single undeniable sign of the world beyond 1998. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My eyes darted from the rearview mirror to the road ahead, searching for anything amiss, any subtle shift, any trick of the light that might betray the town's sinister secret. The houses blurred past, their cheerful porches and manicured lawns mocking my growing dread. The trees along the road grew denser, their branches interlocking overhead, forming a verdant tunnel. I pressed harder on the accelerator, the speedometer needle climbing steadily. 60, 70, 80. The car hummed, a comforting drone against the frantic beat of my heart. Minutes stretched into an eternity. I passed familiar landmarks, the old covered bridge, a weathered barn with a sagging roof, a particularly gnarled oak tree that looked like something out of a fairy tale. But with each passing landmark, a sickening sense of déjà vu washed over me. Hadn't I seen that barn before? And that tree? No, I was leaving. I had to be leaving. The road began to curve, winding gently through a patch of thick woods. The sunlight, once bright, now struggled to penetrate the canopy, casting long dancing shadows that seemed to twist and writhe with a life of their own. I was sure I was making progress. The town was behind me now, surely. I hadn't seen a single building for what felt like 10 minutes. My breath hitched in my throat. This was it. I was finally breaking free. Then, just as I rounded a particularly sharp bend, the woods suddenly thinned. And there it was. Not the open highway I craved. Not the endless stretch of road leading to civilization. No, it was the familiar sight of Havenwood Falls, spread out before me like a postcard. The iconic water tower, the steeple of the First Presbyterian Church, even the distinct red awning of Michael's coffee shop. All perfectly arranged, exactly as they had been when I started my drive. My foot slammed on the brake, sending the car skidding slightly on the asphalt. A choked gasp escaped my lips. I stared, wide-eyed and numb, at the impossible vista. How? How was this possible? I hadn't turned around. I knew I hadn't. I had driven straight, unwavering, resolute in my escape. Yet here I was, back at the entrance of the town, facing the Welcome to Havenwood Falls sign, as if I had just arrived for the first time. A cold dread seeped into my bones, a chilling certainty that solidified the horror. This wasn't some trick of the mind, some optical illusion. Havenwood Falls was a self-contained loop, a temporal prison perhaps, or something far more sinister. The realization wasn't just physical this time, it was existential. My reality was unraveling piece by agonizing piece. I drove back into town, a zombie behind the wheel. The earlier panic now replaced by a terrifying, hollow resignation. The cheerful faces of the townspeople, the children playing in their yards, the familiar hum of daily life. It all felt like a cruel mockery. They were actors on a stage, repeating their parts, unaware of the invisible walls that confined them. And I was now part of the cast, forced to play along. My next desperate thought was communication. If I couldn't physically leave, maybe I could find a way to alert the outside world. I needed a working phone signal, an internet connection that wasn't filtered, a newspaper that wasn't 2 decades old. I headed straight for the Havenwood Falls Public Library. Emily, the librarian, was usually there, surrounded by stacks of books and the quiet hum of the building's ancient air conditioning. Maybe she, with her quiet intelligence, could offer some insight, some forgotten piece of town lore that explained this madness. She looked up from behind the circulation desk as I entered, offering a gentle smile. "Back so soon, Michael?" she asked, her voice soft and even. "Find what you were looking for?" My throat felt tight. "Emily," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need your help. I need to find out about the outside world. News, current events, anything past, say, 1998. Her smile faltered slightly, replaced by a look of mild concern. "Past 1998, Michael? Is everything all right? We have plenty of newspapers and magazines from this year. The Havenwood Chronicle, the New York Times, even some People magazines with Leonardo DiCaprio on the cover." She gestured vaguely towards a rack of yellowing periodicals. "No, Emily, you don't understand," I pressed, my voice rising slightly with urgency. "I mean actual current events. News from 2023. Technology. The internet. Smartphones." I pulled out my phone, a sleek slab of glass and metal, and held it up. This isn't just a phone, it's a computer, a camera, an entire world in my pocket. Emily blinked slowly, her brow furrowed. She looked at my phone with a mixture of confusion and polite disinterest, as if I were showing her a particularly intricate child's toy. "That's a very clever device, Michael," she said, her tone patronizingly gentle. "Is it some kind of new handheld game? I've heard some of those are quite advanced these days." She paused, then added, "You know, the internet here is a bit temperamental. Only dial-up access, and it's mostly for research. Not much in the way of smartphones yet, I'm afraid." The blood drained from my face. She genuinely didn't know. She couldn't comprehend it. It wasn't just that the town was stuck in 1998. The people were stuck there too. Their perceptions, their understanding of the world were perfectly aligned with the year. They weren't lying. They simply couldn't see past the illusion. "Emily," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "what year is it?" She gave me a puzzled look, as if I'd asked the most obvious question in the world. "It's 1998, of course, Michael. April 12th, 1998. She even glanced at a digital clock on her desk, which confirmed her statement. A digital clock that should have been an analog one, I noted with a fresh wave of nausea. Wait, no, digital clocks were around in 1998. It was the date that was wrong. Or rather, for her, it was right. I felt a cold, creeping sense of isolation. I was utterly alone in this knowledge. Everyone else was a willing participant, a contented prisoner. I couldn't reason with them, couldn't explain. Their minds simply wouldn't process it. I stumbled out of the library, the quiet hum of its peaceful interior now feeling like the buzzing of a hive of unconscious drones. The cheerful sunlight outside felt oppressive, the vibrant colors of the town sickening. I walked aimlessly, my mind racing, trying to find a crack in the facade, any tiny inconsistency that might offer a clue. I passed the old diner, the aroma of sizzling bacon and coffee drifting out. I saw David, the mechanic, wiping grease from his hands outside his garage, whistling a cheerful tune. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. Then something caught my eye. A small detail, almost imperceptible. On the side of the diner, tucked away beneath a faded awning, was a small hand-painted sign. It wasn't for the diner itself, but for something else. A small, almost illegible symbol, faded by time and weather, but distinctive nonetheless. It was a stylized interlocking set of 3 circles, forming a kind of triangular knot. I'd seen it before, I was almost certain, but I couldn't place where. It wasn't a common symbol, not one I recognized from 1998. It felt older, or perhaps utterly alien. I felt a jolt of something that wasn't quite hope, but a spark of desperate curiosity. This symbol, unlike everything else, seemed out of place. It was a whisper against the roar of 1998. Could it be a clue? A hidden message? Or just another layer of this elaborate, terrifying deception? My heart, which had been numb, now pulsed with a renewed, if fragile, sense of purpose. I was trapped, yes, but perhaps, just perhaps, I wasn't entirely helpless. The symbol was a thread, and I had to pull it no matter where it led. I had to pull it no matter where it led. The symbol. It was my only tangible lead in this suffocating charade. My mind raced, replaying every instance I'd seen it, etched into the base of the antique radio in my rented house, subtly integrated into the diner's perpetually laminated menu, stamped discreetly on the spine of a local history book I'd idly picked up in the library. The library. That felt like the most logical next step. A place of knowledge, even if that knowledge was meticulously curated and frozen in time. I needed to know if this symbol was unique to Havenwood, if it held a recognized meaning, or if it was something far more insidious, a secret code hiding in plain sight. The next morning, I made my way to the Havenwood Public Library, a quaint red brick building with ivy creeping up its walls, looking exactly as it would have in 1998. The air inside was thick with the scent of aging paper and dust, a comforting aroma that, for a fleeting moment, almost made me forget the chilling reality of my situation. Almost. I approached the main desk, where a woman with neatly pinned gray hair and spectacles perched on her nose was meticulously cataloging books. She looked up as I neared, a pleasant, almost practiced smile gracing her lips. Her name tag read Martha. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound casual, as if I were just another resident seeking a good read. "I was hoping you could help me. I'm new to Havenwood, and I've noticed a particular symbol around town. I was curious if it's a town emblem, or has some local significance." Martha's smile didn't falter, but her eyes behind the thick lenses seemed to hold a flicker of something unreadable. "A symbol, dear? Which one might that be?" I quickly sketched the crude outline of the symbol on a scrap of paper I'd found in my pocket. The intertwined loops, the central dot. It felt like an act of rebellion, bringing this hidden mark into the open. She peered at my drawing, her head tilted slightly. "Oh, that," she said, her voice still perfectly calm. "That's just a decorative flourish, dear. An old design from a local artisan who used to live here generations ago. We like to keep a bit of that local flavor alive." A decorative flourish? My gut tightened. It felt like a deflection, too easy, too rehearsed. Really? Seems to be quite prevalent. I've seen it on various items, even some older furniture. "Indeed," Martha replied, her smile widening just a fraction. "He was quite prolific. A beloved figure in his time. You'll find his work all over Havenwood if you know where to look. We're very proud of our heritage here." Her words were innocuous, but the undercurrent of insistence was palpable. It was a gentle warning, I realized. Asterisk, don't look too closely. Don't dig too deep. Asterisk. I feigned acceptance. "I see. Well, thank you. I was just curious." I paused, then added, "Do you have any local history books? Perhaps something about Havenwood's founding, or notable figures?" "Of course," she chirped, pointing to a section of shelves. "Over there, Havenwood Chronicles, Founders of Havenwood, and several others. You might find some of his artwork depicted within those pages, if you're interested." I thanked her and made my way to the designated section, my heart thumping a little faster. She was watching me, I could feel it. Every move I made, every book I pulled from the shelf was being observed. This wasn't just a library. It was another stage in their elaborate play. I scanned the spines, looking for the book I'd seen before, the one with the symbol on its spine. There it was, Echoes of Havenwood. a pictorial history. I pulled it out, along with a couple of others, and retreated to a secluded table in the back corner, positioning myself so I could see the main desk without being too obvious. My hands trembled slightly as I opened Echoes of Havenwood. It was a thick, heavy volume, filled with sepia-toned photographs and flowery descriptions of the town's idyllic past. I flipped through the pages, searching, my eyes darting over images of old town squares, historical figures, and quaint local businesses. And then I saw it. Not just a decorative flourish. Not just an artisan's mark. On page 47, there was a photograph of the original Havenwood Town Hall, built in the late 1800s. Above the main entrance, carved into the stone lintel, was the symbol. It was larger, more prominent than I'd seen it anywhere else, undeniably an official emblem. But the accompanying caption made no mention of it, instead focusing on the architectural style and the mayor at the time. I turned the page. Another photo, this one of the town's founding families, gathered for a portrait. Several of the men wore small, ornate pins on their lapels. Pins bearing the symbol. Again, no mention in the text. The further I delved, the more it appeared. On the stained glass window of the old church, hidden within the patterns. On the family crest of the town's wealthiest industrialist, subtly woven into the design. It was everywhere, woven into the very fabric of Havenwood's history, yet meticulously omitted from any written explanation. Martha had lied. Or more accurately, she had adhered to the script. The symbol was clearly more than a decorative flourish. It was an integral, silent part of Havenwood's identity, a secret language spoken only by the initiated and deliberately obscured from outsiders. A cold dread began to seep into my bones. This wasn't just a town stuck in 1998. It was a town built on a lie, a carefully constructed facade designed to hide something profound, something powerful. The symbol wasn't just a clue. It was a brand, a mark of ownership, perhaps. I continued my research, cross-referencing names and dates. I found mentions of a local benevolent society, the Havenwood Preservation League, founded in the early 20th century, dedicated to maintaining the town's unique heritage. Their emblem, displayed on a faded photograph of their inaugural meeting, was, of course, the symbol. Benevolent Society. Preservation League. The words rang hollow, dripping with irony in my current predicament. What exactly were they preserving? And from whom? My mind raced, connecting the dots. The town's unchanging nature, the constant surveillance, the subtle manipulation of information, the sudden appearance of the symbol everywhere once I started looking. It all pointed to a highly organized, deeply entrenched group. This Preservation League was no quaint historical society. It was the governing body, the architects of this elaborate illusion. I felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with fear. I was getting closer. Too close, perhaps. I glanced up, my eyes instinctively drawn to Martha at the front desk. She was no longer looking at me. She was engrossed in her cataloging, her back to me, but I knew she was aware. They were always aware. I needed to find out more about this Preservation League. Who were its members? What was its true purpose? And most importantly, how did it maintain such absolute control? I discreetly snapped a few pictures with my phone, the only piece of modern technology that still worked, albeit without a signal, of the pages depicting the symbol. I knew it was risky, but I needed evidence, something tangible to hold on to, something to prove I wasn't losing my mind. As I closed the last book, a shadow fell over my table. I looked up, my heart leaping into my throat. Standing there was a man I hadn't seen before, tall and broad-shouldered, with an unerringly calm expression. He wasn't wearing a uniform, but his posture, his quiet presence, radiated authority. He looked like he could have stepped right out of a 1950s detective novel. Sharp suit, neatly combed dark hair, eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "Enjoying our local history, are we?" he asked, his voice a smooth baritone, devoid of any genuine warmth. I forced a smile, trying to appear unperturbed. "Yes, it's fascinating. Havenwood certainly has a rich past." His gaze flickered to the books piled on my table, then to my hands, still holding my phone. My thumb was hovering over the gallery app. He didn't say anything about it, but the silent acknowledgement was chilling. "It does indeed," he agreed, his eyes locking onto mine. "We believe in honoring our traditions, preserving the essence of what makes Havenwood unique." "So I've gathered," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "The Havenwood Preservation League, I believe?" A subtle shift in his expression. A flicker of something in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or a momentary assessment. "You've been doing your research." It wasn't a question. "Just trying to understand the town better," I said, trying to sound innocent. He nodded slowly, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. "Understanding is a valuable pursuit, but sometimes too much understanding can complicate things." The veiled threat hung in the air, a perfectly polished piece of intimidation. He knew I was digging. He knew I had seen the symbol, and he knew I was piecing together its significance. "I'm David, by the way," he offered, extending a hand. His grip was firm, almost crushing. "One of the town elders. We like to keep an eye on things, ensure everyone feels welcome and settled." David. The name felt like another carefully selected piece of the puzzle, designed to sound ordinary, trustworthy. "I'm Alex," I replied, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "Alex," he repeated, savoring the name. "Well, Alex, if you have any more questions about Havenwood's history, or anything else, feel free to ask. We're a close-knit community. We look out for each other." The words were meant to be reassuring, but they sounded like a cage closing around me. "We look out for each other." Meaning asterisk, we look out for you. Asterisk. He lingered for another moment, his presence radiating a quiet, unwavering authority, before turning and walking away, disappearing into the stacks. I watched him go, my breath catching in my throat. I was no longer just an unwilling resident. I was a target. My investigation had been noticed. The thread I was pulling was connected to something far larger, far more powerful than I had anticipated. The decorative flourish was the emblem of my captors, and I had just openly confronted one of its apparent leaders. My heart pounded, a frantic drum against my ribs. I had to get out of there. I gathered the books, returning them quickly to their shelves, my movements jerky and rushed. I needed to process this to plan my next move. But as I hurried towards the exit, my eyes fell upon a small framed photograph hanging on the wall near the library's main entrance. It was an old picture, faded and yellowed with age, depicting a group of stern-faced men and women, dressed in formal attire from the early 20th century. At the center of the group stood a man with a striking resemblance to David, the same piercing eyes, the same set to his jaw, and pinned to his lapel, unmistakable, was the symbol. Beneath the photograph, a brass plaque read, "Founding members of the Havenwood Preservation League, 1923. I froze. My mind reeled, struggling to comprehend what I was seeing. The man I had just spoken with, David, an elder of the town, looked identical to a man photographed a century ago. It wasn't just a resemblance, it was the same person. A shiver of pure terror ran down my spine, colder than anything I had felt before. This wasn't just a town stuck in 1998. This was something far, far worse. The people in charge. They weren't just preserving history. They were history. Or perhaps something beyond it. Something unnatural, impossible. My blood ran cold, and the air around me seemed to grow heavy, suffocating. The symbol, the lie, the surveillance, and now this impossible continuity of life. Havenwood wasn't just a prison. It was a horrifying, living museum, curated by beings who defied the very laws of time. The air around me seemed to grow heavy, suffocating. The symbol, the lie, the surveillance, and now this impossible continuity of life. Havenwood wasn't just a prison. It was a horrifying, living museum, curated by beings who defied the very laws of time. The thought spun my head into a dizzying vortex. Every face I'd seen, every conversation I'd had, every mundane detail of this town, suddenly twisted into something sinister, a meticulously crafted performance. Were these people even real? Or were they just incredibly sophisticated automatons, repeating their 1998 routines for an unseen audience? A cold dread settled deep in my bones, far more profound than any fear of physical harm. This wasn't just about escaping. It was about understanding a reality that had shattered everything I knew. I had to find the source, the puppet masters behind this chilling tableau. I had to find a flaw, a crack in their perfect illusion. My first instinct was to retrace my steps, to look at everything again, but with this new terrifying lens. The symbol. It had appeared everywhere, subtly woven into the fabric of Havenwood. I remembered seeing it on the old Welcome to Havenwood sign, etched into the cornerstone of the town hall, even faintly visible on a faded billboard advertising a 1998 summer blockbuster. It wasn't just a mark, it was a signature, a brand. And if Havenwood was a museum, then the symbol was the curator's emblem. I made my way back to the town square, my eyes scanning every detail with a frantic intensity. The old clock tower still chimed 2:15, just as it had every time I'd passed it. The same kids were playing hopscotch near the fountain, their laughter echoing with an unsettling familiarity. A woman pushed a stroller past me, the baby inside cooing. Was that the same baby? The same woman? The horrifying implication was that they were frozen in a loop, living the same moments day after day, year after year for decades. I remembered David, the mechanic, his garage, his routine, the way he'd always been busy, always had a specific part on order. Was he just a program repeating his role? And Jessica, the librarian, with her quiet intelligence. Had she ever noticed the loop? Was she aware? Or was her consciousness, like everyone else's, trapped in a pre-programmed cycle, unable to perceive the repetition? The thought was a chilling prospect. It implied that I was the anomaly, the only one experiencing continuity, the only one truly living in this dead zone. I needed proof, something tangible that wasn't just a symbol or a feeling. I needed to find the mechanism of their control, the source of their power. If they could manipulate time, if they could create this elaborate facade, where did they do it from? There had to be a control room, a hidden facility, some kind of infrastructure. My gaze fell upon the old, disused power station on the outskirts of town. It stood dilapidated, its windows boarded up, a relic of an earlier era even for 1998. No one ever went there. It was too obvious, too mundane to be suspicious. But what if that was the point? A perfect blind spot. Everyone in Havenwood knew it was condemned, a place to avoid. That made it the perfect place to hide something. I started walking, trying to appear casual, but my heart hammered against my ribs. The streets were quiet, the afternoon sun casting long, unmoving shadows. The air was still, almost heavy, as if the very atmosphere was being carefully preserved. I passed Emily's diner, the scent of stale coffee and fried food wafting out. Emily was at the counter, polishing it with a practiced, repetitive motion. Her eyes, usually so warm, now seemed vacant, a mirror reflecting a predetermined existence. I shivered. The power station was a crumbling brick structure, overgrown with vines. A rusted chain link fence surrounded it, long since broken in several places. I slipped through a gap, my boots crunching on dry leaves and broken glass. The silence here was absolute, broken only by the distant, faint sounds of the town. A dog barking, a child's shout, sounds that seemed to come from a different reality, muffled and distant. The main door hung ajar, revealing a cavernous interior shrouded in dust and cobwebs. Moonlight barely filtered through the grime-caked windows, illuminating enormous, defunct generators, their metal casings rusted and peeling. It looked exactly like what it was, an abandoned building. But I wasn't looking for generators. I was looking for something else. I moved deeper inside, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The air was thick with the smell of decay and damp earth. I checked every nook, every crevice. There were old offices, their desks covered in decades of dust, papers yellowed and brittle. Nothing. Just the ghosts of a forgotten industry. Frustration began to mount. Had I been wrong? Was my theory just a delusion born of isolation? But then I caught a glint of something metallic under a pile of rubble. I knelt, pushing aside broken bricks and splintered wood. It was a metal grate, bolted into the concrete floor, unlike anything else in the building. It looked too new, too clean despite the layer of dust. My heart pounded with renewed hope. This was it. This was an anomaly. I tried to pry it open, but it was bolted down tight. I searched frantically for something to use as a lever. An old crowbar lay half buried in a pile of debris. I seized it, feeling a surge of adrenaline. With a grunt, I wedged the crowbar under the edge of the grate and pushed. The metal groaned, the bolt straining. With a final agonizing creak, one bolt snapped, then another. The grate lifted, revealing a dark shaft. A gust of cool, stale air wafted up, carrying a faint metallic scent. Not rust, but something else, something synthetic. I peered down, shining my flashlight into the abyss. It was a narrow, vertical tunnel, equipped with a ladder descending into the darkness. This wasn't part of an old power station. This was an access shaft hidden in plain sight. I hesitated for a moment, a primal fear of the unknown washing over me. What lay down there? What horrors awaited me at the heart of this living museum? But the thirst for answers, the desperate need to understand, overpowered my fear. I had to know. I had to find the truth no matter how terrifying. I began my descent, the cold metal rungs biting into my gloved hands. The darkness swallowed me whole, the beam of my flashlight my only companion. As I climbed deeper, the distant sounds of Havenwood faded entirely, replaced by the rhythmic thumping of my own heart. The air grew colder, and the metallic scent intensified. After what felt like an eternity, my boots touched solid ground. I was in a narrow underground corridor, stark and unadorned. The walls were smooth, made of some dark, unfamiliar material that absorbed the light. This was no ordinary basement. This was something built with purpose, with advanced technology. I started walking, my footsteps echoing eerily in the confined space. The corridor stretched endlessly, a silent, oppressive tunnel. Then ahead, a faint glow. As I approached, the glow intensified, revealing a heavy circular door, made of the same dark, seamless material as the walls. At its center, illuminated by an internal light, was the symbol. The symbol I'd seen everywhere in Havenwood. The symbol I'd dismissed as a local emblem. Here it pulsed with a soft, ominous light, the true signature of the curators. This wasn't just a door. It was a portal to the heart of their operation. I reached out, my fingers trembling as they brushed against the cool, smooth surface. The symbol seemed to hum under my touch, a low, resonant vibration that I felt deep in my bones. Before I could process what I was touching, the door hissed, and a narrow seam of light appeared around its edge. It began to retract silently, sliding into the wall with an unnerving grace. What lay beyond was a scene that defied belief, a sight that would forever shatter my understanding of reality. It was a vast circular chamber, filled with an intricate web of shimmering, translucent energy conduits that pulsed with a soft, ethereal light. In the center, suspended in midair, was a colossal, crystalline structure, slowly rotating. And around it, seated at consoles that glowed with alien displays, were figures. Not human, not animal. Figures that seemed to shimmer, their forms indistinct, their presence radiating an ancient, incomprehensible power. They were the curators, and they were watching me. A sudden, piercing alarm shrieked through the chamber, a sound that vibrated through my skull, paralyzing me. The shimmering figures turned, their indistinct gazes fixing on me with an intensity that burned. I had broken through their illusion, intruded into their sanctuary. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I was no longer just an observer. I was a trespasser, and they were about to make me pay for my curiosity. Intensity that burned. I had broken through their illusion, intruded into their sanctuary. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I was no longer just an observer. I was a trespasser, and they were about to make me pay for my curiosity. The air around me thickened, pressing in with a palpable weight. It wasn't just the glare of their eyes, it was a profound, suffocating shift in the atmosphere, as if the entire town had drawn a collective breath, holding it, waiting. The subtle hum I had grown accustomed to, the almost imperceptible vibration of the town, intensified. It became a low, resonant thrum that vibrated deep in my chest, a disquieting heartbeat beneath the surface of everything. They didn't rush me. There was no shout, no sudden aggressive movement. Instead, a figure detached itself from the silent crowd. It was Mrs. Henderson, the woman from the bakery, her face still etched with that permanent, pleasant smile. But her eyes, they were different now. Deeper, darker, reflecting a knowing that sent a chill down my spine. She began to walk towards me slowly, deliberately. And as she did, others followed, forming a silent, advancing semicircle around me. Their steps were perfectly synchronized, a soft, rhythmic padding on the asphalt that was utterly chilling in its precision. As they closed in, a whisper started, not from one person but from everywhere at once. It was a chorus of voices, soft and overlapping, yet perfectly intelligible, as if a single ancient entity was speaking through many mouths. You don't belong here. You disturb the pattern. You threaten the peace. It wasn't accusatory, not angry. It was mournful, almost regretful, like a parent scolding a misguided child. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. I spun around, desperate, my eyes darting for an exit. The narrow alleyway I had used to sneak in was now blocked by more figures, their faces blank, their eyes fixed. I tried to run, pushing past a man whose arm felt unnaturally stiff, like a mannequin's limb. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the town's slow, measured pulse. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to break free from this suffocating, unnatural calm. But my escape was futile. Hands, surprisingly strong despite their gentle grip, closed around my arms. They weren't forceful, yet they were impossible to break free from. It was like being held by an invisible current, an irresistible, unseen force that simply would not allow me to move against it. I struggled, yelling, but my voice seemed to be absorbed by the oppressive silence of the town. My desperate cries swallowed whole. They guided me, not dragged, but steered with an eerie grace towards the town square. The quaint gazebo, which had once seemed charmingly picturesque, now loomed like an altar. In its center, where the local band had played earlier, stood Mr. Abernathy, the town mayor. He wasn't smiling. His face was grave, etched with a solemnity that deepened the lines around his eyes. His gaze was piercing, holding a depth of understanding that made my blood run cold. "You have seen too much," Mr. Abernathy said, his voice calm, resonating with an authority I hadn't heard before. It wasn't the voice of a small-town mayor. It was the voice of someone who held the reins of something vast and incomprehensible. "You have attempted to unravel what must remain woven. What is this place?" I demanded, my voice trembling but defiant. "Why is everyone stuck in 1998? A sigh seemed to ripple through the gathered townsfolk, a collective exhalation of sorrow. Mr. Abernathy looked at me with an expression of profound regret, a sadness that seemed to stretch back decades. "Stuck? No. We are preserved. We chose this moment, this perfect, fragile moment." He began to explain, not in a rush, but with the measured cadence of someone reciting an ancient, sacred truth. He spoke of the great disappointment that came after 1998. Not a single cataclysmic event, he clarified, but a gradual, insidious decay. The relentless acceleration of technology, the internet's rise, the slow, imperceptible loss of genuine community, the erosion of simple joys, the constant barrage of information and noise. "We saw it coming," he said, his eyes distant, gazing not at me, but at some unseen horizon of memory. "We saw the world rushing towards a future that was colder, louder, more broken. A future devoid of the very essence of what made life truly good." He paused, his gaze returning to mine, sharp and intense. "And so we stopped it. For us, for our children and for their children. We created a haven, a timeless echo of what was pure and good." "How?" I whispered, utterly bewildered, my mind reeling. "How can you just stop time?" Mr. Abernathy gave a small, sad smile. "Not time precisely. We stopped our time. We created a sanctuary, a bubble of perfect preservation. Every memory, every detail of this town, from the paint on the diner to the songs on the radio, is meticulously maintained. It requires focus, unity, belief, an unwavering collective will." He gestured to the surrounding faces, their expressions serene, almost beatific. "We are all connected. Our collective consciousness maintains the illusion. Our shared memory keeps 1998 alive, vibrant, and eternal. Every thought, every feeling, every moment is a thread in this tapestry, woven together to create a perfect, unchanging reality. And you," he continued, turning back to me, his voice hardening slightly, losing that mournful quality. "You are an anomaly, a tear in the fabric. Your disbelief, your questions, they threaten to unravel everything we have built. They introduce doubt, discord, a dissonant note in our perfect harmony. And discord is death to us. It threatens to break the spell, to shatter the illusion, to return us to a future we fought so hard to escape." The collective hum around me intensified, a low, menacing drone that resonated deep within my bones. I felt a pressure building in my head, a strange, disorienting sensation, as if my very thoughts were being squeezed. The air grew heavy, thick with an unseen force. "We cannot allow you to leave," Mr. Abernathy stated, his words chillingly final, devoid of any warmth. "Not with your memories intact. Not with your knowledge of our truth. The outside world cannot contaminate our sanctuary, and your truth cannot shatter our peace." My mind raced, frantically searching for an escape, for a loophole. They weren't going to kill me, not in a conventional sense. But what then? What was worse than death? "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, fear tightening its icy grip around my throat. "You must become one of us," he said, his eyes locking onto mine, holding me captive. "You must forget the world outside. You must embrace 1998. You must become a fiber in our tapestry, a thread in our perfect, unchanging reality." or you will simply cease to be. Your consciousness will be rewoven, your memories replaced, your identity absorbed into the collective. The pressure in my head became unbearable. Images flashed before my eyes, my own life, my car, my phone, the faces of friends, all the things that defined me, rapidly fading like old photographs bleaching in the relentless sun. My sense of self began to fray, to unravel at the edges. No! I screamed, struggling again with a desperate primal force, but the grips on my arms were unyielding, like steel bands forged from an otherworldly will. The townsfolk began to chant, a soft, harmonious murmur that was both soothing and terrifying. It wasn't words, but a series of tones, a haunting melody that seemed to resonate with the very foundation of the town, vibrating through the ground beneath my feet. The air shimmered, distorting the world around me. The colors of the buildings, the clothes, the sky, all seemed to intensify, becoming impossibly vibrant, almost glowing with an inner light. I felt a strange warmth spread through my chest, then a cold numbness in my extremities. My thoughts became sluggish, heavy, as if wading through thick mud. The memory of my journey here, of the outside world, felt increasingly distant, like a dream I was trying to recall upon waking, slipping through my fingers. My vision blurred, the faces of the townsfolk swirling into a shimmering kaleidoscope. Mr. Abernathy's face, once stern, now seemed to soften, almost welcoming. His lips curved in a gentle, benevolent smile. He held out a hand, not to strike, but to invite. "Let go," he whispered, his voice echoing in my mind, not just from him, but from every single person in the square, a chorus of persuasion. "Let go of the noise. Embrace the peace. Embrace the unchanging. Embrace your new home." I fought against it, a desperate, primal struggle against an encroaching tide of oblivion. I knew deep down that if I succumbed, I would be gone. The person I was, my entire history, my very soul would be rewritten, absorbed into their perfect eternal 1998. My last conscious thought was of the faded photograph in my pocket, the one that had started this whole journey, the one that proved there was a world beyond this carefully constructed lie, a world that still existed, vibrant and real. Could a single worn image, a fragment of truth, defy the collective will of an entire town? The world tilted, and then a profound darkness began to descend. World beyond this carefully constructed lie, a world that still existed, vibrant and real. Could a single worn image, a fragment of truth, defy the collective will of an entire town? The world tilted, and then a profound darkness began to descend. The jolt was physical, a sudden violent lurch that ripped me from the precipice of understanding. My eyes snapped open, a throbbing ache behind them, and for a terrifying moment, I didn't know where I was. The familiar floral wallpaper, the antique dresser, the scent of lavender potpourri. I was back in my room at the Havenwood Inn. But how? And when? The last thing I remembered was the cold tile of the diner floor, the flickering neon sign, the overwhelming sense of dread as the implications of that photo crashed down on me. I scrambled upright, my head spinning, a cold sweat dampening my shirt. My hand instinctively went to my pocket, searching for the worn photograph, the irrefutable proof. It wasn't there. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I tore through my pockets, checked the bedside table, peered under the bed. Nothing. The photo was gone. A wave of icy panic washed over me. Had I imagined it? Had the stress finally broken me? No, the memory was too vivid, too sharp, the emotions too raw. The image of the old forgotten newspaper clipping, the date, the faces, it was real. Someone had found me. Someone had taken it. A soft, insistent knock rattled the door, making me jump. My breath hitched. I knew who it was, even before the calm, measured voice spoke from the other side. "David? Are you awake? Michael here. Just checking in." My mind raced, trying to construct a plausible defense, an innocent explanation for whatever state they might have found me in. My voice, when it came out, was a ragged whisper. "Come in, Michael." The door opened and Michael stepped inside, his usual genial smile firmly in place, though his eyes held a glint I hadn't noticed before, a flicker of something calculating, almost possessive. He carried a tray with a glass of water and a small plate of what looked like dry toast. "Rough night, David?" he said, his tone laced with a practiced concern that did little to soothe my rapidly escalating paranoia. "We found you collapsed near the diner. You seemed quite disoriented. Said you'd had a dizzy spell." My blood ran cold. Disoriented. I managed, my voice still hoarse. I must have just been tired. Long day. It was a pathetic lie and we both knew it. Michael nodded slowly, placing the tray on the bedside table. Of course. Havenwood can be a lot for some folks. All that peace and quiet, it takes some getting used to. We just want to make sure our guests are comfortable, rested. Sometimes when people are overstimulated, they can get confused, see things that aren't quite there. His gaze was steady, unwavering, and utterly unnerving. It wasn't an accusation, not directly. It was a warning, delivered with the politeness of a seasoned interrogator. I appreciate your concern, I said, trying to keep my voice even, despite the tremor in my hands. I'm fine now, just a little shaken. Good, good, Michael replied, his smile widening, though it didn't reach his eyes. Just remember, David, Havenwood thrives on its tranquility. We all work very hard to maintain it. It's a special place built on harmony. Any disruption, any deviation from that, can be unsettling for everyone. We wouldn't want anyone to feel unwelcome. The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air between us. He wasn't talking about a dizzy spell. He was talking about the photograph, about my discovery, about my attempt to pierce the veil. He knew, or at the very least the town knew. I understand, I said, forcing a nod. I'll be more careful. Michael gave a final, approving nod, then turned to leave. Rest up, David. There's a lovely pancake breakfast waiting downstairs when you're ready. A perfect start to another peaceful day in Havenwood. He closed the door softly behind him, leaving me alone in the oppressive silence. Peaceful. The word echoed in my mind, twisted and menacing. This wasn't peace. This was a prison, meticulously maintained, enforced by a collective will that seemed to bend reality itself. They hadn't just taken the photo. They had tried to gaslight me, to plant the seed of doubt, to make me question my own sanity. I had to find that photo. Or if it was truly gone, I needed another, more permanent piece of evidence. Something they couldn't simply make disappear or explain away as a dizzy spell. My first thought was to return to the diner, to confront whoever might have been there, to search for any dropped fragments. But the memory of Michael's words, his steady gaze, stopped me. They were watching. They knew. Going back to the scene of my collapse would be foolish. It would confirm their suspicions, solidify their belief that I was a threat. I needed to think. If the town could erase a physical object, could it also subtly alter memories, rearrange events? The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through me. How could I trust anything I saw, anything I heard? But there had to be something that predated their carefully constructed illusion. Something too old, too fundamental to be easily overwritten. A place. A record. My mind went back to my initial research, the sparse historical data available about Havenwood. It was a town with a surprisingly shallow past, at least in any public records. Most accounts started around the mid-20th century, with vague mentions of an earlier settlement. That felt wrong. Every American town had a deeper history, a founding, a story, a library, an old dusty library. That was it. If there was any genuine, unedited history of Havenwood, it would be hidden there, perhaps in a forgotten corner, overlooked by the town's constant temporal maintenance. I dressed quickly, my movements stiff and hurried. Skipping breakfast, I slipped out of the inn, trying to appear nonchalant, as if I were merely taking an early morning stroll. Every face I passed, every casual glance, felt like an accusation. The smiles of the townsfolk seemed a little too wide, their greetings a little too eager. I was being watched, I was certain of it. The Havenwood Public Library was a small, unassuming brick building, nestled between the hardware store and the town's single movie theater, which was, predictably, playing Armageddon. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old paper and dust, a welcome change from the pervasive, clean, synthetic scent of the rest of the town. A kindly older woman with spectacles perched on her nose, Mrs. Henderson, sat at the front desk, engrossed in a paperback. She looked up, offering a gentle smile. "Good morning, dear. Can I help you find anything?" "Just browsing, thank you," I replied, trying to sound casual. "I'm interested in some local history if you have anything." Her smile faltered slightly, a momentary flicker of something I couldn't quite place. "Oh, Havenwood's history is quite simple, really," she said, her voice a little too bright. "Mostly about the founding families, the early days of the apple orchards. You'll find a small section over there." She gestured vaguely towards a corner with a few shelves. I thanked her and made my way over, my heart pounding. The section was indeed small, mostly filled with idyllic accounts of town picnics and harvest festivals. Nothing that hinted at anything unusual. Nothing that went back further than the 1950s in any detail. But then my fingers brushed against a spine tucked away at the very back, half obscured by a newer glossy pamphlet. It was an old leather-bound volume, its title faded but still legible, Chronicles of Havenwood, a founder's account. It looked ancient, certainly predating 1998. It felt heavy, substantial, as if it held secrets within its brittle pages. I pulled it out carefully, dust motes dancing in the faint sunlight filtering through the grimy window. I opened it to a random page, and my eyes immediately caught a passage that sent a chill down my spine. It spoke of the town's earliest days, not of apple orchards, but of a unique geological formation, a temporal nexus, and the efforts of the town's original founders to harness its unique properties for the betterment of the community. Temporal nexus. The words jumped off the page, confirming my wildest fears. This wasn't some natural anomaly, it was being controlled. I flipped through more pages, my fingers trembling. There were sketches, crude but detailed, of an elaborate structure. Not a clock tower, not a memorial, but something far more complex, almost arcane. It was described as the Chronos Spire, the heart of Havenwood, designed to stabilize the flow of time within its immediate vicinity. And then a paragraph that made my breath catch in my throat. It spoke of a devastating storm in the early 20th century, which supposedly destroyed the spire. But the text didn't sound like destruction. It sounded like a cover-up. The spire, though damaged, was deemed too vital to be lost. Its essence was carefully relocated, secured deep beneath the very foundations of our governance, to ensure its continued silent work. Beneath the foundations of our governance, the town hall, the seemingly unremarkable brick building that stood at the center of the town square. It wasn't just a municipal building. It was a carefully chosen wrapper for the true heart of Havenwood's temporal prison. The storm, the destruction, was just a convenient fiction to explain its disappearance from public view, while allowing its power to persist. As this realization slammed into me, a low hum began to vibrate through the floorboards. The fluorescent lights above flickered violently, plunging the library into momentary darkness before snapping back on, brighter, harsher. Mrs. Henderson at the desk looked up, her expression a mix of confusion and mild annoyance. But for me it was a profound warning. I had found it. I had touched the truth, and the town was reacting. It was pushing back. The pressure in my head returned stronger this time, a dull throb that threatened to explode. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out, to go to the spire. I clutched the ancient book, knowing I couldn't take it, knowing it would be missed. But I had the information. I had the location. The Chronos Spire. Underneath the town hall. I glanced at Mrs. Henderson. Her eyes, usually so benign, now seemed to hold a distant, knowing sadness, as if she were a silent guardian of a terrible secret, disturbed by my intrusion. I knew then that I wasn't just being watched. I was being actively opposed. The town wasn't just stuck. It was alive, and it was fighting back. And I was its primary target. I had to get to the spire, and I had to do it now, before Havenwood swallowed me whole. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just some temporal anomaly. It was a conscious entity, and it wanted me gone. Or worse, it wanted me here forever. The chill that snaked up my spine wasn't from the night air. It was the cold dread of knowing I was battling something beyond human comprehension. The spire. It was the only way. I broke into a run, my heart hammering against my ribs, each thud echoing the urgency of my situation. The familiar streets of Havenwood, once a quaint backdrop, now twisted into a labyrinth of defiance. The streetlights flickered erratically, plunging entire blocks into momentary darkness, only to snap back on, revealing subtle shifts. A parked minivan I'd seen an hour ago was now a different color. Or perhaps it was a different minivan entirely. The houses seemed to lean in, their windows like unblinking eyes, watching my every desperate stride. I kept my gaze fixed on the distant, looming silhouette of the spire, a dark needle piercing the perpetually twilight sky. It was a beacon, but also a monument to whatever malevolent force held this town captive. My path, however, was anything but direct. Each turn I took seemed to lead me down a slightly different version of the street I remembered. A familiar diner, Pop Seats, was suddenly Ruby's Diner, its neon sign buzzing with a sickly green glow instead of red. The music from open windows, once a mix of 90s pop and grunge, now seemed to coalesce into a single distorted hum, a low thrumming that resonated in my bones. A payphone on a corner, long dead, suddenly shrieked to life, its insistent ring slicing through the oppressive quiet. I flinched, my eyes darting towards it. No one was there. No one could be there. Yet it rang again and again, a relentless mocking sound. I forced myself to ignore it, pressing on, but the sound seemed to follow me, a phantom ringing in my ears even after I'd rounded the next corner. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of ozone and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like old blood and rust. I passed the town square, where the old analog clock tower, which had been stuck at 3:17 for days, now seemed to be spinning its hands wildly, blurring the numbers into an illegible smear. Then just as I looked away, it snapped back to 3:17. A cruel joke. I heard footsteps behind me, light, quick steps like a child running. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. Nothing. Just the empty street, the shadows stretching long and distorted under the ghostly streetlights. But the footsteps continued, a rhythmic patter, always just out of sight, always just behind me, a relentless echo of my own accelerating pace. Panic began to set in, a cold wave washing over me. This wasn't just an illusion. It was a psychological assault. Havenwood wasn't just affecting the environment. It was trying to dismantle my mind. I clamped down on the fear, forcing myself to focus. Spire. Just the spire. I veered off the main road, hoping to find a shortcut through the residential area. The houses here were older, their paint peeling, their porches sagging. The lawns were overgrown and strange archaic toys lay scattered. A rusted big wheel, a faded skip-it, a Tamagotchi blinking forlornly in the dim light. It was a graveyard of abandoned childhoods, each object a tiny anchor to the year 1998. As I navigated the narrow gaps between houses, the air grew colder, biting at my exposed skin. I saw movement in the periphery of my vision. A flicker of white behind a window, a curtain twitching. I stopped, my heart pounding. Was it just the wind? Or was someone or something watching me from inside those dormant homes? A low growl emanated from the darkness of an alleyway ahead. It wasn't an animal growl. It was deeper, more guttural, a sound that vibrated with ancient malice. I froze, my body screaming at me to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. The shadows in the alley deepened, coalescing into something vaguely humanoid, something tall and slender. It didn't move, but its presence was palpable, a suffocating weight in the air. I forced myself to take a step back, then another, slowly retreating. The shadow didn't pursue, but simply watched, an oppressive silence descending as I backed away. It was a guardian, a sentinel of Havenwood, placed there to deter me. My detour through the residential area was a mistake. I turned and fled, abandoning any pretense of caution. I burst back onto a main thoroughfare, my lungs burning, the phantom footsteps still dogging me. The spire was closer now, its peak almost visible above the rooftops, but the town was throwing everything it had at me. As I ran past a small park, the swings began to creak, swaying back and forth with an invisible momentum. The carousel, long since broken, emitted a faint tinny music box melody, a distorted, mournful tune that was almost unbearable. I saw figures on the carousel, blurred and indistinct like ghosts of children, their faded clothes and vacant stares fixed on me as I passed. They weren't moving, just sitting there, eternally riding a broken machine. I had to get off the streets. They were too open, too vulnerable. I spotted the familiar red brick of Havenwood High School, a sprawling, empty complex. Maybe I could cut through the grounds, use the buildings for cover. It was a risk, but staying exposed was a death sentence. I vaulted over a low fence, landing heavily on the manicured lawn. The school building loomed, dark and silent, its windows reflecting the dim, perpetual twilight. The air here felt different, heavy with a sense of forgotten youth and lingering despair. I pushed open a side door, surprised to find it unlocked, and slipped inside. The interior was a time capsule. Lockers lined the empty hallways, adorned with faded stickers and old band flyers. The faint scent of stale cafeteria food and forgotten textbooks hung in the air. My footsteps echoed loudly, each sound magnified in the oppressive silence. I moved quickly, trying to navigate the unfamiliar layout. The school maps on the walls were old, some peeled at the edges, detailing a layout I wasn't entirely sure was still accurate. The classrooms were dark, their doors ajar, revealing rows of empty desks and chalkboards covered in forgotten lessons. A science classroom I passed had a skeletal model sitting eerily in the corner, its plastic grin seeming to follow me. Then I heard it. A faint, distant murmur. It sounded like voices, a muffled conversation, coming from deeper within the school. My blood ran cold. I was sure I was alone. Was it a trick? Another psychological ploy? Or were there others here? The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through me. I didn't want to encounter anyone else from Havenwood. Not now, not when I was so close. I pressed myself against the locker, straining to hear. The voices grew slightly clearer, but they weren't distinct words. It was like a radio tune between stations, a cacophony of overlapping whispers and broken sentences, all steeped in the faint static of a bygone era. It was unsettling, disorienting. Suddenly, a voice cut through the din, clear and chillingly familiar. "Michael? Is that you, Michael?" It was Mrs. Henderson, the librarian. Her voice, usually soft and academic, now carried an unnatural lilt, a saccharine sweetness that made my skin crawl. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. How did she know I was here? How did she know my name? "Michael, dear," her voice echoed, seemingly from everywhere at once, bouncing off the locker-lined walls. "You shouldn't be here. You know the rules. Havenwood isn't a place for change." I took a shaky breath, pressing my back harder against the cold metal. I couldn't respond. I couldn't give away my exact position. "We like things just the way they are." Another voice chimed in, deeper, more gravelly. "Officer Miller. Always have. Always will." A third voice, younger, full of a strange, almost manic energy. "Don't you want to stay, Michael? It's so much fun here. Forever and ever. 1998. This one I didn't recognize, but the tone was horrifying. They weren't physically present, I realized, or at least I couldn't see them. These were echoes, projections, manifestations of the town itself, using the voices of those I'd encountered to try and break me. They were the town's immune system, fighting off the foreign body that was me. I sprinted down the hallway, ignoring the disembodied voices that now shrieked and whispered, growing louder, more frantic. "Stay. You belong here. Don't leave us." I burst through another door, finding myself in the gymnasium. The vast space was dark, but a sliver of moonlight filtered through a high window, illuminating dusty basketball hoops and a faded school emblem on the court floor. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and sweat, and then I saw it. At the far end of the gym, by the stage, a single flickering CRT television sat on a rolling cart. It was playing static, but within the snowy screen, distorted images began to form. Images of me walking down Main Street, me talking to Mrs. Henderson, me in the diner, my face twisted and blurred as if melting. It was a surveillance feed, but it was impossible. The town was showing me that it had seen everything, that it knew everything. The screen flickered violently, then the static resolved into a single horrifying image. My own face screaming. But my mouth wasn't open, and my eyes were wide with terror. It was a silent scream, a frozen moment of pure, unadulterated fear. I had to get out. This place was a trap. I found another exit, a heavy metal door that led out to the back fields. I shoved it open with all my might and stumbled out into the cool night air, gasping for breath. The spire. It was directly ahead now, towering over everything, its summit almost touching the clouds. It wasn't just a building. It was a structure of immense, impossible scale, a dark, jagged mountain of metal and stone. It seemed to pulse with a faint, internal light, a deep, unsettling hum emanating from its depths. The ground beneath my feet felt different here, harder, colder, almost metallic. The grass gave way to cracked pavement, then to a coarse, dark gravel that crunched under my worn sneakers. I was at the edge of the spire's immediate domain. A final obstacle lay before me, a rusted chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, surrounding the base of the spire. It was old, clearly not meant to keep people out anymore, but it served as a symbolic barrier. And beyond it, the true scale of the spire became terrifyingly clear. Its base was massive, a colossal windowless wall of dark material, stretching upwards into the perpetual twilight. There was no obvious entrance, no door, no visible way in. But there had to be. This was it. This was the source. I had come too far, endured too much to be stopped now. The hum from the spire intensified, filling the air, vibrating through my very bones. It was a song of forgotten time, a lullaby of eternal stasis. and I, the anomaly, was about to disturb its slumber. I gripped the chain-link fence, the cold metal biting into my hands, and began to climb. The town of Havenwood, the entire world of 1998, seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what I would unleash. I pulled myself over the top of the fence, the sharp points digging into my gloved hands even through the thick material. For a moment I hung there, silhouetted against the dim glow of the town, a trespasser on the precipice of a profound secret. Then I dropped. My feet hit the gravel with a crunch that sounded deafening in the unnatural quiet. The air inside the compound was different. Heavy. Stagnant. It smelled of ozone, old metal, and something else, a faint, almost imperceptible hum that vibrated through the ground beneath my feet. This wasn't just a power station. It was the engine of this looped reality. I moved low, my eyes scanning the perimeter. No motion sensors, no cameras that I could discern. It was as if the facility hadn't anticipated an intruder in decades, or perhaps it simply didn't need to. What would be the point of security in a world that never changed? The main building loomed ahead, a hulking concrete structure with grimy windows reflecting the distant streetlights like vacant eyes. A single rusted service door stood slightly ajar at the side, beckoning me with an unsettling invitation. Every instinct screamed caution, but a stronger force, the relentless pull of unanswered questions, urged me forward. Pushing the door open, I stepped into a darkness so profound it felt like a physical weight. The air here was colder, laced with the metallic tang of electricity. I fumbled for my small flashlight, its beam cutting a shaky path through the gloom. Dust motes danced in the light, suspended in the still air, testament to years, perhaps decades, of undisturbed quiet. The corridor was long, lined with silent, forgotten machinery. Gauges with frozen needles, levers caked in grime, and faded warning signs in languages I didn't recognize. The hum grew louder here, a deep resonant thrum that vibrated in my chest, a living heartbeat beneath the cold industrial shell. I followed the sound, deeper into the heart of the facility. It led me to a vast cavernous chamber, unlike anything I'd ever seen. At its center stood an enormous cylindrical apparatus, easily 30 feet tall and 20 across, made of some dark, polished metal that absorbed the light rather than reflected it. It wasn't humming. It was singing, a low resonant note that seemed to warp the very air around it. Thin, glowing lines of an eerie blue light pulsed rhythmically along its surface, tracing intricate patterns that shifted and reformed with hypnotic precision. Cables thicker than my arm snaked from its base, disappearing into the floor and walls, presumably feeding power to, or drawing power from, the entire grid of Havenwood. This was it. This was the source. As I approached, the air grew warmer, charged with an almost tangible energy. My hair felt like it was standing on end. I could hear a faint crackling sound, like static electricity, emanating from the cylinder. There were no visible controls, no screens, nothing that suggested human interaction. It was a monument to a technology beyond my understanding, a silent, omnipotent God presiding over a frozen reality. Circling the apparatus, I noticed a small console recessed into the floor nearby, almost hidden by shadows. It was old, clearly not part of the primary system, but perhaps a legacy component or an emergency interface. The screen was dark, but as I knelt, my fingers brushed a series of worn buttons. One of them, slightly recessed, glowed faintly with a dim yellow light. Pressed it. The console whirred to life with a groan, a burst of static, and then a series of green text characters flickered onto the screen. It was an old-school command line interface, like something out of an early 90s sci-fi movie. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The key. The text scrolled rapidly. Havenwood Reality Construct. Status. Operational. Initiation date. 10/26/1998. Primary objective. Stasis maintenance. Secondary objective. Subject isolation. Tertiary objective. Anomaly neutralization. My breath hitched. Subject isolation? Anomaly neutralization? What did that mean? And 10/26/1998. That was the exact date the loop began. I scrolled through the logs, my fingers trembling on the dusty arrow keys. Page after page of system diagnostics, energy readings, and anomaly reports. Log entry October 27, 1998, 3:17 and 12 seconds. Minor temporal ripple detected near Sector 7. Containment field integrity, 99.98%. Log entry November 5, 1998, 11:45 and 1 second. Subject activity within acceptable parameters. No memory degradation detected. Log entry January 15, 1999, 18:22 and 30 seconds. External temporal signature detected. Origin unknown. Anomaly neutralization protocols initiated. Field strength increased. External temporal signature? Was that me? My arrival? The idea sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just a passive loop. It was an active, intelligent system, designed to maintain its stasis and respond to threats. I kept scrolling, searching for an explanation, for a name for why. And then I found it. A series of entries under a separate heading labeled Project Aegis. Project Aegis, Primary Researcher. Dr. Elijah Reynolds. Project Aegis, Sponsor. U.S. Department of Defense. Classified. Project Aegis. Objective. Development of temporal stasis field for strategic containment. Dr. Elijah Reynolds. The name was familiar. My mind raced back to the old newspaper clippings, the whispers in the town. He was the brilliant, reclusive physicist who had lived in Havenwood, the one whose lab was rumored to be connected to the power station. The man who had vanished without a trace, just like the town had vanished from the timeline. The logs continued, detailing the increasingly desperate attempts of Dr. Reynolds to stabilize the field after an unforeseen cascade event. Log entry October 25, 1998, 23:58. Cascade imminent. Initiating full containment sequence. Project Aegis going live. All personnel evacuated. Log entry October 26, 1998, 0 o'clock and 1 second. Field parameters nominal. Havenwood contained. Temporal integrity established. He hadn't vanished. He had initiated it. This wasn't an accident, not entirely. It was a desperate measure. But for what? Strategic containment? I scrolled further, my eyes devouring the words. And there, buried deep in the diagnostic reports, was the chilling truth. Subject status. Critical. Subject. Amelia Reynolds. Condition coma. Support system. Temporal stasis field, Havenwood. Purpose. Preservation of subject's neural activity and potential recovery. Amelia Reynolds. Dr. Elijah Reynolds' daughter. She was in a coma. And the entire town, the entire loop of 1998, was a support system for her. A temporal stasis field designed to preserve her, to keep her alive, perhaps to find a cure, by freezing time around her. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying clarity. The unchanging town, the repeating days, the lack of aging, the isolation. It wasn't just a time loop. It was a life support system on a monumental scale. A father, a brilliant scientist, driven by grief and a desperate hope, had trapped an entire town, an entire segment of reality, to save his daughter. And then I saw the last entry, dated just a few days ago, according to the system's internal clock. Log entry May 10, 2024, 14:03 and 17 seconds. External anomaly signature detected. Interference with primary subject's neural patterns observed. Containment field integrity compromised. Initiating anomaly neutralization protocol, Phase 2. Threat assessment high. May 10, 2024. That was my current date. The date I had arrived. And the system thought I was an anomaly, a threat to Amelia. It was trying to neutralize me. That's why the town had been subtly pushing back. Why people like Sarah had warned me away. Why the anomalies had grown stronger. The system was fighting to protect its primary objective. I looked at the massive, glowing cylinder, then back at the console. There was a menu option. System override. My finger hovered over it. A mixture of fear and adrenaline coursing through me. If I shut this down, what would happen to Amelia? What would happen to Havenwood? To the people I had come to know, frozen in their perfect, unchanging 1998? But what if Amelia was long gone? What if this was just a machine endlessly running, keeping a ghost alive at the cost of countless lives? And what about the outside world? Was it just waiting for Havenwood to reappear? Or had it simply forgotten? My gaze fell on another option. Subject status monitor. I selected it. The screen flickered, displaying a complex array of medical data. Heart rate, brain activity, oxygen saturation. All flatlined. A single red alert blinked at the top of the screen. Neural activity on. Subject deceased. Estimated time of death. 01/01/2005. Amelia Reynolds was dead. She had been dead for almost 2 decades. The system was running on inertia, a digital ghost keeping a physical ghost alive, trapped in a timeless prison. Dr. Reynolds's desperate plan had failed, but the machine, oblivious, continued its grim vigil. A wave of profound sadness washed over me, quickly replaced by a cold, righteous fury. This wasn't preserving life. It was preserving a delusion, at the expense of everyone, everything. My eyes narrowed. The system was still active, still drawing immense power, still holding Havenwood in its grip, and it was still trying to neutralize me. It was a threat that needed to be stopped. I scrolled back to the system override option. My hand was steady now. There was no more hesitation. This wasn't about saving a life. It was about releasing thousands. It was about ending a nightmare. As I prepared to select Initiate Shutdown, a low guttural growl echoed from the shadows behind the towering cylinder. The hum of the machine seemed to deepen, its blue lights pulsing with a frantic intensity. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Nothing, just the shadows stretching and twisting. But the growl had been real, and it had been close. Then a flicker of movement. Not a person, not an animal. Something else. A ripple in the air itself, a distortion like heat haze off asphalt, but colder, darker. It coalesced slowly into a vaguely humanoid shape, shimmering with the same eerie blue light as the central apparatus. It was tall, impossibly thin, and its form seemed to constantly shift, like looking at something through warped glass. It had no discernible face, but I felt an immense, ancient intelligence focus on me. It was the anomaly neutralization protocol made manifest. The system had a guardian, a physical embodiment of its will, its defense mechanism. The air grew heavy, crackling with energy. The blue entity took a single, deliberate step towards me, and the hum of the machine intensified into a deafening roar. It was a warning, a final defense. I gripped the console, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The screen still glowed with the Initiate Shutdown option. The guardian shimmered, its form solidifying just enough for me to perceive an outstretched, spectral hand. It wasn't going to let me leave. It wasn't going to let me touch that button. I had found the truth. I had found the heart of Havenwood's prison. And now I was face to face with its protector. This wasn't just about escaping a time loop anymore. It was about a confrontation, a battle for reality itself. My fingers hovered over the Initiate Shutdown command, the blue entity advancing, its silent threat echoing in the roaring hum of the temporal stasis field. The fate of Havenwood, of Amelia Reynolds's long-dead memory, and of my own existence hung in the balance. The final act was upon me. Own command, the blue entity advancing, its silent threat echoing in the roaring hum of the temporal stasis field. The fate of Havenwood, of Amelia Reynolds's long-dead memory, and of my own existence hung in the balance. The final act was upon me. The entity didn't strike. It didn't roar. It simply coalesced. The shimmering blue light intensified, not into a blinding flash, but into a crystalline structure, intricate and ethereal, pulsing with an inner luminescence. From its core a voice emerged. Not a voice of a machine, but one imbued with a profound, almost heartbreaking weariness. It was a woman's voice. Amelia Reynolds. "You found it," she whispered, her voice like wind chimes in a forgotten attic. The failsafe, the owner command. It was meant to bring me back, or to release me. My breath hitched. My entire body vibrated with the field's hum, but her voice cut through it, clear and devastating. "Amelia." I managed, my own voice hoarse with disbelief. "A fragment," she clarified. "A digitized echo. My consciousness preserved at the very moment I activated the Chronos loop. This entire town, Michael, is a monument to a single perfect day." July 17, 1998. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. A monument. Not a prison, not a curse, but a desperate act of preservation. "Why?" I demanded, the roaring hum seeming to amplify my desperation. "What happened on July 17, 1998? The blue entity shimmered, and suddenly images flooded my mind. Not my memories, but hers. A sun-drenched morning in Havenwood. A little girl, no older than 6, with bright red pigtails, laughing as she chased a butterfly through the park. Her name was Lily, Amelia's daughter. Her husband, David, strong and kind, pushing Lily on a swing, their laughter echoing through the trees. A perfect family, a perfect day. Then the shift. The images blurred, fractured with static. A frantic phone call. An emergency. A car accident. A drunk driver. The hospital. The hushed tones. The flat line. Lily and David. Both gone. On July 17, 1998. The blue light pulsed with an agony that transcended mere data. I was a quantum physicist. Amelia's voice continued, laden with grief. My work was on temporal mechanics, the possibility of localized time dilation. After they were gone, I poured everything into it. Not to bring them back, I knew that was impossible. But to preserve that one perfect day. To stop time just for them, just for Havenwood. A bubble of eternal joy, untouched by the tragedy that followed. The entire town, every smiling face, every repeated conversation, every perfectly preserved moment. It was all a projection of Amelia's grief, a digital mausoleum. The residents weren't truly alive, not in the way we understood it. They were sophisticated echoes programmed to live out that single ideal day over and over. The Chronos loop, I breathed, the pieces finally clicking into place. It wasn't a malfunction. It was by design. Yes, Amelia confirmed. But the power required. The field became unstable. It began to bleed into the surrounding reality. My physical body couldn't sustain the connection, couldn't control it. So, I uploaded a fragment of myself, my core consciousness, into the system to maintain it. To be the guardian of their eternal summer. But why the secrecy? Why did you make it so hard to find you? Because I knew, she replied, a faint sadness in her tone, that if anyone ever found the core, they would have a choice. To release Havenwood, to let the loop collapse, to finally let them rest. Or to become the new guardian. To take my place. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't some villainous plot, but a mother's desperate love, twisted into a technological marvel of sorrow. The blue entity solidified, resolving into a translucent, shimmering image of Amelia herself, appearing just as she might have looked in 1998, her eyes holding an ancient weariness despite her youthful visage. You entered the own command, she said, her spectral gaze fixed on me. You now have the authority, the power to decide. The temporal stasis field roared around us, a symphony of preserved moments, a testament to a grief so profound it bent reality. I looked at the shimmering image of Amelia, then back at the faint, distant lights of Havenwood through the transparent dome of the core chamber. All those people living out their best day, forever oblivious. Jessica working at the diner, David on his mail route, Emily playing in the park. They weren't real, not anymore. They were echoes, digital ghosts in a perfect machine. But were they truly suffering? Or were they at peace, in their endless perfect day? And what of Amelia? Trapped as a digital echo, a caretaker for her own sorrow. What happens if I release it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The field will collapse, Amelia explained, her voice devoid of emotion, yet heavy with implied consequence. Havenwood will return to the present. Or rather, what would have been the present. The physical structures will crumble, having been held in an artificial state for decades. The echoes, they will simply cease to be. Their perfect day will end. And I will finally be gone. A wave of profound sadness washed over me. To end their existence, even a simulated one, felt like a second death. But to leave them trapped, and to condemn myself to an eternity of guardianship. And if I become the guardian, then you will replace me, she said, her eyes locking onto mine. Your consciousness will merge with the core. You will maintain the Chronos loop. Keep Havenwood safe in its eternal 1998. You will become the blue entity, the silent watcher. Your life, your future, your own memories. They will become part of the system. You will be the new Amelia Reynolds, endlessly preserving July 17, 1998. The thought sent a chill down my spine. To lose myself, to become a ghost in the machine, bound to a grief that wasn't even my own. It was a terrifying prospect. But the alternative, to be the one who pulled the plug on an entire town, on a mother's last desperate act of love. I closed my eyes, picturing the real world, the one I had left behind. My apartment, my job, my friends, everything that made me me. Would I trade it for this? For an eternity of watching a perfect, false day? But then I thought of the anomalies, the glitches, the moments where the loop almost broke, the faint whispers of a reality that wanted to reclaim its own. Amelia's system was failing, slowly but surely. Even her perfect preservation was unsustainable. The temporal stasis field, for all its power, was a wound in reality that refused to heal. It can't last, can it? I asked, opening my eyes. Even if I took over, it would just delay the inevitable. The field is unstable. It's too much. Amelia's translucent form seemed to sag. It is a heavy burden, Michael. One I have carried for too long. My strength, my digital essence, it wanes. The system requires more and more energy, more and more focus. Eventually, it will collapse on its own. It is merely a question of when. The truth was stark. There was no true preservation, only a prolonged farewell. My choice wasn't between saving Havenwood or destroying it, but between ending its suffering now or prolonging it, and in doing so, sacrificing myself to a dying cause. My gaze fell upon the interface, the glowing panel beneath my hand. The OWN command was still active, awaiting my final input. The decision was mine. To release, to let go, to allow reality to heal, even if it meant erasing a beautiful, tragic illusion. With a deep, shuddering breath, I made my choice. My fingers hovered over the console, then pressed a sequence of commands, a final, irreversible protocol that Amelia had built into the failsafe for this very purpose. Release. The blue entity of Amelia Reynolds looked at me, and for the first time, I saw not just sorrow, but a flicker of peace in her translucent eyes. "Thank you, Michael," she whispered, her voice fading, becoming even more ethereal. Tell them I loved them." As her image began to dissipate, the roaring hum of the temporal stasis field intensified to an unbearable crescendo. The entire core chamber vibrated violently. Cracks spiderwebbed across the transparent dome, revealing glimpses of Havenwood outside, now flickering like a faulty projection. Buildings wavered, people froze mid-stride, their perfect smiles momentarily distorted. A blinding white light erupted from the core, engulfing everything. It wasn't painful but overwhelming, a sensation of being stretched and pulled in every direction, of time itself unraveling around me. I felt a profound sorrow for Amelia, for Lily, for David, for the beautiful, impossible dream she had tried to build. Then silence. Absolute, profound, deafening silence. When my vision cleared, I was no longer in the shimmering core chamber. I was standing in a field of overgrown weeds, under a sky that was unmistakably, jarringly today's sky. The air was cool, fresh, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant pine. Before me lay the ruins of Havenwood. Not the vibrant, eternally 1998 town, but a ghost town, decades of neglect etched onto its decaying structures. Buildings were hollowed-out shells, roofs caved in, windows shattered. The diner was a collapsed heap of splintered wood and rusty metal. The park where Lily had once laughed was a tangle of thorny bushes and dying trees. The Chronos loop was gone. The temporal stasis field had collapsed. Havenwood had returned to its rightful place in time, but time, in its relentless march, had not been kind. I walked through the desolate streets, my boots crunching on broken glass and debris. There was no sign of the residents, no trace of the perfect echoes. They had simply ceased to be, fading like a dream upon waking. But as I reached the center of what was once the town square, I saw something. A small weathered plaque half buried in the weeds. I knelt and brushed away the dirt. It read, "In loving memory of Lily Reynolds, 1992 to 1998, and David Reynolds, 1968 to 1998. They lived their best day forever. Amelia Reynolds, 1965-2023. My blood ran cold. Amelia, her physical body. She hadn't just uploaded a fragment of her consciousness in 1998. She had maintained the loop for decades, her physical self slowly dying as she poured her life force into the system, until her death in 2023, the very year I had stumbled into Havenwood. She had been clinging on, a digital ghost in a dying machine, until I arrived. My arrival, my activation of the OWN command, hadn't just given me a choice, it had given her release. I stood there, amidst the ruins of a town that had once been frozen in a perfect moment, now reclaimed by the relentless march of time. The silence was heavy, filled with the echoes of laughter that would never truly fade from my mind. I had come seeking a mystery, a thrilling secret. I found a tragedy, a profound act of love and grief that had warped reality for decades. I had freed Havenwood, but at what cost? The town was gone. The echoes were gone. Amelia was finally at peace, but her story, her sacrifice, would forever be etched into my soul. As I turned to leave the ruins, a faint shimmer of blue caught my eye. It was just a trick of the light, perhaps, or a lingering memory, but for a fleeting moment, I felt a gentle breeze like a whisper, passing through the desolate streets. The town that was permanently stuck in 1998 was no more. But its story, the story of Amelia Reynolds and her eternal summer, would live on. And I, Michael, the one who walked away from the wreckage, would carry it. A haunting reminder of the lengths grief can go, and the terrible beauty of letting go. The world had moved on, and so finally could Havenwood. And so finally could I. But a part of me, a part of my perception of reality, would forever be colored by the impossible, heartbreaking perfection of July 17, 1998.